Hey, friends at Reuters are reporting that the president has made a decision on the Canada and Mexico tariffs, but that they won't actually be implemented until March 1st. I was wondering if you could confirm that and talk through some of the president's thinking.
I saw that report and it is false. I was just with the president in the Oval Office, and I can confirm that tomorrow, the February 1st deadline that President Trump put into place at a statement several weeks ago, continues. The president will be implementing tomorrow a 25% tariffs on Mexico, 25% tariffs on Canada, and a 10% tariff on China for the illegal fentanyl that they have sourced and allowed to distribute into our country, which has killed tens of millions of Americans. These are promises made and promises kept by the president.
The president yesterday said that last night he was planning to discuss whether an exemption would be made on oil imports. Do you have any information on what decision he made there, or will there be exemptions at all offered under this?
I don't have an update or readout for you on the exemptions, but those tariffs will be for public consumption in about 24 hours tomorrow, so you can read them then. Stephen Nelson.
Thank you very much, Caroline. I have 3 questions, if that's all right. I'd like to ask you about press freedom and then about 2 economic matters.
Sure.
On press freedom, on Tuesday you announced plans to roll back the more restrictive press badge policy of the Biden White House. But there's a different anti-press freedom policy I wanted to ask about. The Biden White House adopted a mysterious pre-screening process for journalists allowed into large event spaces that in the pre-pandemic days of the first Trump term were open to all journalists on campus. This effectively limited the diversity of reporters present and blocked the asking of questions that large segments of the American public wanted answered. As press secretary, can you commit to abolishing this mysterious pre-screening process?
There were a lot of mysterious processes that my team and I have had to unravel over the past 2 weeks that were implemented by the previous White House and in particular the previous press shop here. And so I can commit to a greater access and transparency, which I believe we already have by ensuring that the 440 journalists whose credentials were revoked will be reinstalled. They will get their credentials if they wish to. We've also, of course, opened up a new seat to new media. And as far as open press events here at the White House, if we tell you it's open press, it's open press.
So just to confirm, this pre-screening thing is something you're aware of and you'll work to undo to the maximum extent possible.
When we say something is open press, it will mean it's open press.
Economic matters, and I can just ask them both at once for
Sure.
you. In New York City, Governor Hochul's congestion pricing went into effect this month. Vehicles that drive through parts of Manhattan have to pay a $9 toll. President Trump has made clear his opposition. He said that it's, quote, the most progressive tax known to womankind. Will the administration be trying to block this? And the second question is, millions and maybe tens of millions of Americans who voted for President Trump were excited about his plans to do away with taxes on tips, overtime, and Social Security benefits. But there's uncertainty about the timing of this. So can you clarify for them when this is going to happen? And does President Trump want this to be in the first, all 3 of those in the first batch of legislation early this year?
Well, to answer your question in one swoop, I will say that President Trump is committed to lowering taxes for Americans, cutting taxes for Americans. As for congestion pricing in New York, I do know that the president spoke with Governor Hochul about that. I don't have any, actions, so to speak, to read out for you on that issue today. Number 2, when it comes to no taxes on tips and Social Security, the president has made it very clear to our allies on Capitol Hill that is a critical piece of this reconciliation package, and he expects that his tax cuts from 2017, which put a lot more money back into the American people's pockets, those must be implemented, and no tax on tips. The president is intent on delivering on that promise, and he will get it done.
And overtime also as part of reconciliation?
Yes. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline. Can you guarantee that those tariffs won't increase prices for Americans, including at the gas pump and the grocery store?
I think Americans who are concerned about increased prices should look at what President Trump did in his first term. He effectively implemented tariffs, and the average inflation rate during the first Trump administration was 1.9%. In fact, when President Trump left office, it was 1.4%. So President Trump is going to do everything he possibly can to cut the inflation crisis that the previous administration imposed on the American people, and he will continue to effectively utilize tariffs.
tariffs do increase prices for Americans, will the administration reverse them?
That's a hypothetical question, and the president is intent on ensuring that he effectively implements tariffs while cutting inflation and costs for the American people. And, you know, the media has this way of just looking at everything in a microscope rather than looking at the whole of government economic approach that this president is taking. He will effectively implement tariffs. He's also, as I just answered from Stephen's question, committed to tax cuts. He's also clearly committed, as evidenced by his executive orders, to unleashing the might of our energy industry, which we know will eventually drive down inflation. And all the other economic measures that this president has made will have a Trump incoming economic boom, just like we saw in our first term.
And has the White House
Sure.
found any?
Fox Business, yes, go
thanks.
ahead.
Keep that, Caroline.
You're welcome.
Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, said today that if the U.S. imposes tariffs, he will respond and he will not relent until the tariffs are removed. Are we seeing the start of a trade war with Canada?
I don't think so. I think the president is going to implement those tariffs tomorrow, and he will respond to Mr. Trudeau's comments in due time, I am sure.
What
Sure.
type of things have to happen? What does the administration need to see in order to avoid those tariffs?
Well, the tariffs are incoming tomorrow on Canada, and the reason for that is because both Canada and Mexico have allowed an unprecedented invasion of illegal fentanyl that is killing American citizens and also illegal immigrants into our country. In fact, I have more language for you right here. Canada, Mexico, and China, which, as I mentioned, President Trump will implement a 10% tariff on China, have all enabled illegal drugs to pour into America. The amount of fentanyl that has been seized at the southern border in the last 2 years alone has the potential to kill tens of millions of Americans. And so the president is intent on doing this, and I think Justin Trudeau would be wise to talk to President Trump directly before pushing outlandish comments like that to the media.
If I may, one more.
Yes, Lindsay.
Go back to the plane crash for one. Let me go back to the plane crash for just 1 second.
You're interrupting your colleague, but
I'm
sure.
sorry, I thought you called on me. Just
I called on
question.
Lindsay.
The president this morning said the Black Hawk helicopter was flying too high. I'm wondering if he's basing that on what he learned from investigators, and if you could offer a little bit more of a window into how he is keeping abreast of this investigation.
Sure.
Is the NTSB briefing him separately? Is he meeting in the Situation Room? You just sort of offer a window into that.
Yeah, the president based that statement on truth because it is truth and it's fact, and it was relayed to him by the authorities who are overseeing the investigation into this horrific plane collision. And the president, as I said in my opening remarks, continues to be briefed on the collision by everybody across his cabinet, the Secretary of Transportation, the Secretary of Defense, the NTSB, who the commissioner there was in the Oval Office with him yesterday. Lindsay.
I also noticed that he is not ordering
Lindsay,
flights
go
to be
ahead.
flown at half staff. I was
Lindsay,
wondering-
go ahead.
In
Thank you.
recent days, the CIA actually revealed that they do also believe that COVID-19 was from a lab leak in Wuhan, China. How is the president planning on responding to this additional intel from the CIA, and will it impact how he responds to them with tariffs?
Yeah, kudos to John Ratcliffe for revealing that truth and that fact to the American people. Many years too late, the Biden administration had a chance to let the American people know the truth about that, and for some reason, they chose not to. I also would just like to point out that several years ago, when I was working in this press shop and President Trump would take to this podium to brief the American people on COVID-19, he suggested that COVID very well may have came from a lab in Wuhan, China. And many members in this very room mocked him for that, said he was spewing conspiracy theories. He was not. We now know that to be the confirmable truth. It took many years for it to come out, but the president was right in this instance again. Sure.
Caroline, thank you. I wanted to ask about Secretary Rubio's trip to Panama first.
Sure.
What did the conversations look like with President Trump on that? The president of Panama says it is, quote, impossible to negotiate over the canal. So what are you expecting from this visit?
So I have not been present for Secretary Rubio's conversations with President Trump about the Panama Canal. I have been present for President Trump's own thoughts on the Panama Canal, and you've all seen them as well in his public statements that he has shown. He believes it's unacceptable that the canal is essentially run by the Chinese Communist Party. If you look at both ends of the canal, massive Chinese Communist Party linked companies run the canal. That's unfair to the American people, many of whom lost their lives many years ago building this canal. The American taxpayers are paying millions of dollars for the canal, and the president believes it's in our national interest as a nation for Secretary Rubio to go there and begin these discussions, and that's exactly why he's doing that.
Caroline.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Caroline.
Is the United States in the process of pulling out of Syria militarily? Because the President wanted to do that in his first term as well, and he had a lot of pushback from the Pentagon and Congress. And based on what he said yesterday, is he considering doing that in a short time?
The President was asked and answered this question yesterday, and he, as the Commander-in-Chief of the United States military, reserves the right to review troop deployments overseas at any point in time.
Is that a topic right now?
Yes.
Thank you. Two questions. So we now know that the staffing was not normal at the air traffic tower, and so with the government freezing the hiring of new federal workers and offering buyouts, are you not afraid that more incidents of different kind could happen with less staffing in different agencies?
Well, the President is intent on ensuring that we are increasing staffing at these agencies, and that's why he signed a very strong executive order on his second day in office, immediately terminating DEI hiring practices at the FAA. He also, following the tragic crash, as you all know, in the Oval Office yesterday, signed a memorandum directing an immediate assessment of the FAA to ensure the federal government is maintaining the highest personnel and aviation safety standards. And I would also just say there's a cultural piece to this as well. If you are an American who has spent many years studying aviation and you graduate from school and you're an air traffic controller based on skill and merit, and then you apply for a job and you're forced to fill out a biographical questionnaire asking you the color of your skin and asking you where you're from in details that aren't relevant at all to the job description, I think that deteriorates the morale of people in this industry. And if you talk to people in this industry, they'll tell you that. In fact, many of them filed a lawsuit against the FAA a couple of years ago under Joe Biden's administration because they were denied positions because of this DEI hiring practice that was putting identity politics over merit and skills. That's unacceptable, and I think just to put a fine point on this, because this is the third or fourth question I've answered on this subject, when you are flying on an airplane with your loved ones, which every one of us in this room has, do you pray that your plane lands safely and gets you to your destination, or do you pray that the pilot has a certain skin color? I think we all know the answer to that question, and as President Trump said yesterday, it's common sense. Rob Crilly.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up on that last question, actually. Has there been any sort of assurance from the FAA that they will immediately improve staffing levels, given the reports of not normal staffing levels on Wednesday?
Oh, absolutely. You had Secretary Duffy here yesterday at the White House at this podium saying that he is on it, and we can all trust that he definitely will be. John Decker.
Thanks a lot, Carol. You called on me, right?
Yes, I did.
Thank you very much.
As long as your name's still John Decker.
It is, absolutely. Thank you. The President's meeting today with the founder and CEO of NVIDIA. What is that meeting concerning, and who sought that meeting?
I don't have details on this. It's a private meeting. It will take place at 2:30 p.m. I'll try to get there in time, and I can let you know after. How's that?
On Guantanamo Bay, can you give more details about setting up that detention facility at Gitmo? How will that come about? What's the timing in terms of standing it up? And of course, this has happened before during the Clinton administration.
Yeah, that's right.
Detainees of Cuban and Haitian descent were both detained at Guantanamo. Are you looking at that model in setting up this detention facility?
Secretary Hegseth, I believe, was on television this morning answering this question, and he said that the Department of Defense is already on it. He has directed his agency to ensure that Gitmo is increasing their capacity for beds, and that's exactly what President Trump's executive order did. It directed Secretary Hegseth and also Secretary Noem to expand the Migrant Operations Center at the Naval Station to provide for this extra detention space, and as Secretary Hegseth confirmed this morning, that operation is underway. Sure.
Caroline, on the tariffs, can you clarify whether those will actually be going into effect tomorrow, or
Yes.
whether there might be some lead time?
Yes.
And are those, they will be going into effect tomorrow?
Correct.
And are those meant to be in place long term, or is there a scenario in which Canada, Mexico, and China can offer concessions and then they would be removed?
At this point, the president has made it very clear those tariffs are going to be implemented and in effect. If the president at any time decides to roll back those tariffs, I'll leave it to him to make that decision. But starting tomorrow, those tariffs will be in place. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline.
Yes.
Can you confirm a report by our friends at the Daily Mail that the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is going to be visiting the White House in February? And also, if I may, do you have any more details on Netanyahu's visit here next week?
Sure. I have not seen that report about the Prime Minister. I can go check back with our friends at the National Security Council and get back to you on that. I can confirm that Prime Minister Netanyahu will be here on Tuesday, February 4th, for a working meeting and visit with the President, and I'm sure you will all be here very excited to cover that visit.